Football! It's a thing we all like and what this video's about. And hello, my name is Adam Cleary. You're right, I've done better intros. Now before we start, I just want to paint a picture in your mind. So one time we're playing What Culture 5-a-side and myself and Adam Wilborn concoct the greatest goal ever scored. We get our two teammates to go to the side of the pitch, thus taking two players with them, thus leaving us both being man-marked. I take the ball off the goalkeeper, leave my marker in the dust as I spray the ball down to Wilborn on the edge of the box, who holds off his marker, rolls it ever so slightly and gently to the side for me to run onto it and absolutely bury it in the bottom corner. We went absolutely mad. We did the shoe shine celebration. Everybody hated us. Why am I telling you that story, you ask? Well, one, to brag, obviously, but two, to illustrate that footballing dressing rooms, whether your opponents or your teammates are in there, can be very complex places indeed. Get on everybody's good side and you have bonds that will last you the rest of your life. Get on everybody's bad side and you tend to have to get changed in your car outside Gateshead Power League. Now, me telling you this story about a bunch of nerds who have a kick around every odd Wednesday is one thing, but what about all the really big names that have got their own tales to tell? Well, glad you asked, because my name is Adam Cleary and these are 10 footballers who got kicked out of the dressing room. Number 10, Dimitar Berbatov. I find it almost impossible to believe that a man like Dimitar Berbatov, the best footballer who didn't like football, could ever annoy anybody. He's just so bloody laid back. But he did, because after he became one of European football's hottest properties back in 2008, boy was that a time he was on the verge of a move to Manchester United. They came in with an inquiry, said, go on Tottenham, name your price, but they were like, no, this is Tottenham Hotspur. We don't sell our best players. With Manchester United turning the screw on getting this deal done, Berbatov realised that he needed to do something on his side to kind of push things forward a little bit. So he told everybody he could that he didn't want to play for Spurs anymore and he wanted to go to Manchester United. Now, how does his teammates react to that? Do they put an arm around him and say, do you know what, Dimmy, you've really carried us these last 2 seasons. You go play for that bigger club. You go have a great old time. They did not. They got really annoyed. Negotiations between the two sides devolved into an all-out war, and because Berbatov had already made his Manchester United-shaped bed, the rest of the first team lobbied to have him kicked out of the dressing room and made to train with the reserves. He did, for an entire month, then he got his move. Number 9, Hatem Ben Arfa. Now, depending on which side of the argument you're on here, Hatem Ben Arfa was either this occasionally exciting, tricky winger who, if he'd had a better attitude, might have achieved something with his career, or one of the most talented players of his entire generation who, had he had better managers than this lump, and this lump, would have gone on to Messi level. Being, as I am, an incredibly nostalgic and prone to over-romanticising things Newcastle United fan, I'm in the latter camp. He scored that goal against Bolton. What do you want me to do? Anyway, after Alan Pardew did his usual trick of falling out with every good player he ever manages, he was sent out on loan to Hull City. Ben Arfa, that is, not Pardew. While there, he was in and out of the side, didn't really show too many of the flashes that had made him stand out at Newcastle, and then when he was unceremoniously hooked by Steve Bruce halfway into the first half of a match at Old Trafford, things went down the toilet. Basically, story goes, Bruce pulled him into the dressing room, sat him down with the statistics and showed him that in those 30 minutes, Alan McGregor, the goalie, had run around more than he had. Ben Arfa responded with, well, what do you want me to do? I'm a number 10, and Steve Bruce's head literally, maybe, exploded. With his teammates not finding this particularly funny, given they just got beaten 3-0, they voted to boot him out of the dressing room, he disappeared back to France, he occasionally trained with the reserves, and he never did anything notable in his entire career again. Except look like an absolute world beater back in France, get a move to PSG, and the whole thing happened all over again. Number 8, Mario Balotelli. I'll be honest, if I'd wanted to here, I could have just done 10 times Mario Balotelli got kicked out of the dressing room, but here we are. Now, while he did mature in his later career, and by that I mean just got out of the spotlight of an incredibly racist British newspaper industry, Balotelli was undoubtedly enjoying some of the best football of his life when Man City first won the league. There were always these crazy stories about what was going on off the field, but again, see the point I just made about the newspaper industry and talk of tensions between him and manager Roberto Mancini Mancini were never far from the back pages. Things appeared to reach a point of no return though on a pre-season tour of America when, clear through on goal in a friendly when nobody cares, Balotelli tried to score an incredibly smarmy little pirouette back heel goal. He missed and Mancini lumped him straight off the pitch and the two had a screaming argument with each other. Not long after, the pair apparently came to blows on the training ground and that was it. Mancini had had enough. He declared him to be a bad influence and with Man City's grip on their championship diminishing, he booted him clean out of the dressing room. Weirdly, his career never quite picked back up from there. Yes, he was an absolute hit in Milan for a couple of seasons, but since then he sort of dwindled around the French leagues and whatnot. He's never quite got back to the heights everybody expected of him. Well, not even when he was at Man City, that European Championships where he battered everybody. Number 7, Sadio Berahino. No, you didn't dream it. At one time, Sadio Berahino was the hottest English prospect in the entire country. His breakthrough season at West Ham saw him net 14 goals in 38 Premier League games. And that's not exactly world-beating numbers, but given West Brom's lowly status and his age, he looked like an absolute world-beater. Now, despite being born in Burundi, Berahino had represented England at every single junior level, and when Tottenham Hotspur came knocking, he decided that's where he wanted to go next in his career. He told West Brom, they said, well, fine, so long as they meet our valuation of you, and he thought that would be that. The only problem is that Tottenham did not reach that valuation for Berahino, and despite the player himself making some very loud noises behind the scenes, deadline day slammed shut, because that's the only way that it ever shuts, with him still a West Brom player. So, taking it all in his stride, he went on Twitter and said he would never play for the club again. That would probably have been fine, except that West Brom's manager at the time was Tony Pulis, not exactly the old arm around the shoulder, don't worry son, we all make mistakes, it'll be fine in the end type, more the get out of my dressing room, I never want to see you again type. This didn't go on forever, of course. Berahino did get back into the West Brom side eventually, but he never quite recaptured that form that got him into both the England reckoning and the Tottenham Hotspur £25 million reckoning. Number 6, Nile Ranger. Now, when Nile Ranger first broke onto the scene for Newcastle United, he looked like being a future star at whatever level he wanted to play at. He looked like 3 or 4 years more experienced on the pitch. He looked about 5 or 6 years more experienced on the ball. The guy looked like he might have it all. And initially, this was such a heartwarming story because Ranger had grown up in London amongst gang culture. He'd been plucked out of that to play football and seemingly was completely turning his life around. As a result, the world was at his feet, and then he threw it all away. Assault, robbery, criminal damage. The guy went from being the most used substitute one season for Newcastle United to not even getting a single minute the next. The guy fell out with pretty much every single one of his teammates, all of his managers, and the entire backroom staff at Newcastle United, and he was forced to train in the reserves, then sent out on loan. He was not allowed back. He ended up falling down the divisions to relatively mixed success, I might add, and has been without a club since Southend United released him in 2018. The guy is still 29. He was an England youth international. He should be banging them in at some level, but it looks unlikely he'll ever get another club again. Number 5, Darren Gibson. Oh yes, we all read those articles, didn't we? Darren Gibson, he's the new Roy Keane because he plays in midfield and he's tough tackling and he's from Ireland and that's it. And yes, while I'm mocking loads of sports websites here, I'm also mocking Manchester United because they were convinced he was going to be the next Roy Keane for a good long old time. They desperately tried to ingratiate him into that midfield to make him the focal point, the linchpin, the everything that Roy Keane was, and it just, well, it didn't work. Despite scoring a goal in the Champions League final in 2011, he wasn't even in the starting lineup for the eventual final. The season after that, he was sent out to Everton, which, as we all know, is just death. Eventually, he found himself at Sunderland at a time when every single thing was going wrong at Sunderland, and despite that, still managed to make himself one of the most wrong things. After the team was relegated, he was filmed in a pub absolutely off his lips, slagging off every single one of his teammates by name. This, of course, led to calls from the rest of his teammates to have him kicked out of the locker room, but he was given a second chance and then got convicted of drunk driving, smashing up loads of cars down a tiny pedestrian 20-mile-an-hour street. He was not allowed back in the dressing room, he was not allowed back in the club, and he left by mutual consent later that year. Number 4, Mauro Icardi. Just a really quick one on this, because Mauro Icardi, he went to Inter Milan, then he started to do stuff with Maxi Lopez's wife, and then he eventually married Maxi Lopez's wife, and then he was doing so well with Maxi Lopez's wife that he got Maxi Lopez's children tattooed on his leg. And everybody at both Inter Milan and at the Argentina national side went, oof. Oh, and then he wrote an autobiography where he basically slagged off all of Inter Milan's fans, and the club made him take it out, but not after it had already been leaked to the press. Everyone hated him. Number 3, Craig Bellamy. There is absolutely no bigger testament to Craig Bellamy's football career than the fact that he was an out-and-out success at nine different football teams. That's 9 different clubs that should never have wanted to let him leave, but did anyway. He was such an enigma that every single football team he played for was very, very happy to see the back of him, while at the same time, the next team in the list was like, do you know what? I bet we can get him to knuckle down and just score goals. But the worst time, the absolute worst time, is not even that time with the golf club. Graham Souness, being completely out of his depth at Newcastle back in the early noughties, decided to try and get Craig Bellamy to play in midfield. Craig Bellamy, he likes scoring goals. He's a centre forward, so he was like, nah, I'm not doing that, boss. And then when pushed further, just said, oh, well, I can't anyway, because I'm injured. When Graham Souness found out he'd been lying, he got really angry. Sending Alan Shearer to go and have a word with him, the two had an incredibly loud, violent bust-up in which, let's face it, Shearer would absolutely have murdered him. But at that point, the damage was done. Souness said he would never, ever allow him to play for him again, so he sent him on loan to Celtic. But not after, of course, he had kicked him out the dressing room, forced him to train with the reserves, and just, I don't know, what would you do in that situation? The footballers have a locker? Set his locker on fire. Why not? Number 2, Valery Bozhinov. Valery Bozhinov was a Bulgarian footballing legend. And I know that's a hot topic. I know you've got lots of opinions about that. What does and doesn't qualify someone as a Bulgarian footballing legend? But please, we'll just move on with this one. Now, the guy played in 9 separate countries. That's more countries than Craig Bellamy has had clubs. And apparently, the one consistent in all of them was he was an absolute goddamn nightmare. During one stint in Italy, he managed to get into a training ground fight with one of his teammates, despite the fact they were both playing in separate games. How does that happen? Oh, but this is the absolute best one though. During his time at Sporting Lisbon, they were involved in a tense 1-1 draw with mere minutes to go when they got a penalty. Bozhinov, the big dick swinging in the wind, he wanted to take it, so he literally shoved regular penalty taker Mateus Fernandes out of the way, then had the tamest effort you've ever seen saved by the goalkeeper. This literally cost them 2 incredibly vital points in the title race that year, and the Sporting top brass went to the manager and said, get him out. Wait, in Portuguese, that's tire-o para fora. That. Number 1, Joey Barton. Where do you want me to start? Actually, weirdly, before I say this, Barton never really fell out with the dressing room at QPR, and he never really fell out with the dressing room at Newcastle United. He just fell out with the dressing room loads at Man City. Stuart Pearce tried to ostracise him after Barton went to the press and said not only were they playing badly, but most of the players they bought in the recent transfer window were substandard. He had him train elsewhere for a couple of weeks while his other teammates, the new signings especially, calmed down. And then the big one, he had that training ground bust up with midfielder Ousmane Darboe, which left the midfielder with a detached retina. He departed the club some months later, saying he just heart wasn't there anymore and he didn't really get on with the manager. Sure. So there you have it. Those are 10 footballers who fell out with the rest of the dressing room, read to you by a man who swears to God that story about scoring that goal with Wilborn is true. Let me know what you made of it all in the comments below. Of course, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I have, of course, been Adam Cleary. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.